welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. Joining me today, not Alan Saunders. It's also not Nick Farabaugh, another guy from Steelers Now, the missing link to it all, our draft guru, Derrick Bell. What is going on, pal?
What's going on, man? Yeah, less than 2 weeks from opening
Less than
night
two
of
weeks.
NFL draft weekend. The best weekend of the entire year. Don't be coming at me sideways because that is 100% a fact. Like the
I was
best
waiting for you
weekend
to
of the
start.
entire
I
year.
was waiting for you to start levitating as you were saying that.
Yeah, I'm so excited, man. It's April is always tough for me because I get absolutely zero sleep, like less sleep than I normally get,
Mhm.
because I'm trying to wrap up on all this different stuff, and there's tons to talk about, prospects to watch, and but it's a fantastic time of year. I really enjoy it. I'm excited to talk some ball today.
Absolutely. I am with you. Month of April, absolutely bananas. As somebody that just got back from WrestleMania last weekend, I also have not been getting much sleep. The bank account
Oh
has
God.
also been hurting quite a bit, and will continue to do so in the month of April. But that's neither here nor there. Derek, you put out your cornerback rankings on the site this week, and first things first, I want to dive into those. We also got a bunch of questions to get to from X. I'm getting better at saying that now, just naturally as opposed to Twitter. So, but yeah, I want to get into these cornerback rankings. Sorry, and go through them a little bit. We'll talk about the players, maybe who we think are the best fits for the Steelers throughout here. But let's start right at the top. Terry and Arnold. Why did he come in as your CB1? Like me, I also have him as CB1. I was ready to take issue with you, by the way, because your picture for this article was Wiggins. And I was like, hold on, if he's CB1 for Derrick after all this conversation we've had about Terry and Arnold, we're gonna have an issue. But no, you rightfully put Arnold as CB1.
Yeah, I know you and I have had quite a few discussions about Terry Arnold, and for me, man, it that I switched and flipped him to my cornerback one back in November. And really he held that position really throughout, the last
Mm,
couple of months. I mean, the thing for me is I don't like I don't know. I try not to like if new tape or new information is available, I obviously want to take that into account. But guys that I absolutely fall in love with on tape, I mean, there is no new tape to evaluate. There was no reason for me to move him off. I will admit that Quinyon Mitchell did make it really close because I got to his film after I got to Arnold after the season was already over, right before the Senior Bowl. Was really impressed with him. But, with Arnold, man, there's just so much to like. And I think that, the way he can change directions, how fluid he is, how sudden he is, combined with the fact that I think he's an excellent run defending corner. He can play inside outside. He has that versatility to him. There's just so much to like about his game. Now I do think that it's worth pointing out that like his tape isn't necessarily flawless, but I think that there are some big plays on tape that he's responsible for, but you have to really take the whole context into account here. This is a guy who's only been playing cornerback for a couple seasons. Like he's really only been at the position for
mhm.
2 years. He came to Alabama as a big time safety recruit. That's kind of where you see the physicality, the willingness to take on blocks, the willingness to come down the flat, make tackles, all that stuff come into play. But for me, Terrion Arnold, I just absolutely love his game. I think, he carries a true first round grade for me. And even though I don't necessarily have as high of a grade on him as I did a guy like Christian Gonzalez last year, not necessarily like a blue chip or near that type of caliber player. Have no qualms with taking him in the first round. I think he's a fantastic player and someone that I think the Steelers should be really interested in if he does indeed, get close to pick 20.
I'm glad you just mentioned that about like comparing the guys at the top of this year comparatively to past years. You look at last year with Christian Gonzalez at the top, going back a couple years, obviously Sauce Gardner at the top, who we both really love, Pat Surtain and JC Horn going back. Where would you rank, the top of this class? Not just Terry and Arnold, but like you have Quinyon Mitchell as your number two. And then you have Wiggins, Kool-Aid, Cooper DeJean, which by the way, I think what's really interesting about this class before you answer that is those five guys. I've seen all five of them be number one by somebody. Like it's just
Mhm.
interesting to me how many different guys people have up at the top of their rankings.
Yeah, I mean, it's also some of that is scheme, right? Like I know some people that I really respect. I try not to peek too much at like other people's ranking lists because I don't want it to necessarily affect or bias my own opinions. But after I put out the rankings, I kind of went back and looked and seen like some people that I really respect their opinions. And I know some people are on like Cooper DeJean, like, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
DeJean is a fantastic player, but for me, he actually grades out better as a safety. So I have him as my top ranked safety on the board. Now I think he can play corner, but I don't necessarily feel thrilled or great about playing him at corner if I'm in a really man heavy defense. So that does affect, kind of how I see his fit, not just in Pittsburgh, but in some of these more man heavy schemes, to where, because I think that he is a little bit stiff in the hips. And I think that there is a little bit of a lag in terms of how he flips and turns and carries guys vertically on the boundary. But there's so much to like about his game. Like, if you're a team that likes to get eyes on the quarterback, play a lot of off coverage zone, you want another guy that can play inside outside. He can play safety. He's really physical. He takes on blocks really well. But I think what sets him apart is, the playmaking skills, like how he plays the ball, how he reads things. He's a really smart player, really cerebral. And then, he has the punt return ability too. Like, he's been a heavy
Yeah.
player, excellent tackler. So there's a lot to like with his game. But I really think, with these guys, it really depends a lot on, like, the scheme, what you're asking them to do. So it's an interesting discussion. Like I said, I finished with Dejean at 5, but it was really, that's not really an indicative of the type of player I think he is. It's just, I knew if I left him off the rankings completely, that people would be asking me, where's Cooper Dejean? So I wanted to put him on there as a corner, but just also add the caveat that he is my top ranked safety. But in terms of, like, where Terrion and Quinion Mitchell fall, Terrion actually would be a little bit below Deontay Banks from Maryland for me last year. So I
Okay.
had, my rankings last year were Gonzalez. He was the top ranked corner, and then I had kind of a smaller second tier, which was Devin Witherspoon and Deontay Banks, and then Arnold would be, like, right there in that conversation for me. And him and Mitchell, like I said, Mitchell did close the gap on him. The testing with with Mitchell was obviously
Yeah.
outstanding, but I just think that
Hmm.
the potential for him is absolutely sky high. I would have loved to have seen more press reps on tape so I could get a really better feel how comfortable he is in that regard. And there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there because he played so much off coverage at Toledo. But the way that he plays the ball, the body control, the timing at the catch point, he's a guy who, like, literally did not. I think he's got one penalty committed over the last 2 seasons. I mean, he runs stride for stride with guys, doesn't have to tug on the jersey. Just, he's such a clean player, who's a real impact player, I think, at the catch point. He's going to be a really good pro. I'm excited to see, where he lands. I'm kind of thinking that he's going to, I think Indy at 15 is, like, kind of where I've thought that he's probably
Yeah.
going
Yep.
to go.
I agree. But really with Cooper DeJean or any of these guys, and I would like to get your take on this because you take a look at what's on the roster right now for the Steelers, and you got Joey Porter Jr., you got Dante Jackson, and then you got some lottery tickets, obviously, and Darius Rush and Corey Trice coming back. But like that to me says they are looking more so for a slot defender. Like if they drafted Cooper DeJean, he's going to start out in the nickel. If they drafted whoever it might be, so does that play into your process of trying to figure out who the best fit is, knowing that, okay, like Dante Jackson has some experience in the slot, but with what the Steelers asked of their guys to do, not the greatest tackler, not going to really come up and give you much in run support. So likely to play more so on the outside, specifically in the Steelers scheme. Does that change who you're looking at here for the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing with DeJean is, as a slot corner, there are going to be times where you're going to be asked to be in the run fit. You're going to have to play the run. You're going to have to take on blocks. You're going to have to get physical, be willing to tackle. And I think that, all those things are actually, like, positives, in my opinion, on his scouting report. Now, the only thing that,
Mhm.
like, I worry about, like I said, there is a noticeable lag when he does have to flip his hips. He's a little bit stiff. And I think that, his change of direction stuff isn't quite as fluid as a guy like Terrion Arnold. So you're looking at different players that could potentially play inside outside. But I just think DeJean, like I said, he's just so smart. And I think that the safety transition is an interesting one because I do think that you put him back there, he could be interchangeable. I think he's got the range, the ball skills are excellent. And, like, people, like, about a really good athlete. He's straight line speed, man. Like, he has a really, really top end gear that's impressive. So I do think that he would definitely be somebody that they'd be interested in. And I know a lot of people really haven't talked about, what, like, Kool-Aid McKinstry, they haven't showed as much, I feel like, attention to him, but
Mhm.
they did take him out to dinner before his pro day. But I'm not absolutely saying that, like, he couldn't be in the mix there, like, in terms of, like, he's a guy who I think most people are saying is going to fall out of the first round now, or, like, go in the 30s or something like that. If he were to fall a little bit in the second round, I mean, he could be a potential maybe trade up target, in my opinion, too.
Yeah.
If the Steelers are just absolutely dead set on, like, hey, we want to come out of this draft with one of these top corners. But it's a really interesting player. We haven't really talked a lot about Nate Wiggins. Nate Wiggins from Clemson. He probably checks as many boxes as anyone else just because the Steelers have shown a tremendous amount of interest in him. I mean, they've met with him formally at the combine, sent the house, of course, like usual, to the Clemson Pro Day. He's a top 30 visit for like fits all these measurables. He's an outstanding athlete. I tweeted this the other day, but I went back and watched some film on him before I did his scouting report on my YouTube channel. He legitimately is one of the fastest players, but probably the fastest corner I've ever evaluated. Like just in terms of like top end speed,
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. He had a 1.76 flying 20 at the 2024 combine, by far the fastest. I mean, the way that he moves is it's pretty unreal. And like some of those highlights where you see him chasing ball carriers down 80 yards down the field, you can definitely get a good look at kind of his strides and the amount of ground that he can cover. So there's a lot of good corners at the top of this class. And, I even though I don't think it's necessarily, priority number one right now, center and receiver would be higher on the priority list
Sure.
for me. This is a premier position, and like there's several guys that I would be comfortable with them taking at 20 or in a trade back scenario.
My questions with Wiggins aren't necessarily things that I can definitively say that he can't do. It's more so that they're exactly that. They're questions. So it's not like I'm watching the tape and saying, "Oh, he can't do this." It's just, "Oh, I would like to see if he can do this." I truly don't know. So, played obviously zone heavy at Clemson, and you really don't see him come up a ton and run support or things like that. So it's just, again, I question how the translation would go to him specifically
Mhm.
to this defense, but I think he's going to be a really good player, assuming that he can make that transition to wherever it might be.
Yeah, and I think the Wiggins conversation is interesting because I think that his temperament is just mild. Like I think some people have kind of gone off the deep end a little bit in terms of like he just will not tackle, he will not play the run.
Mhm.
I don't see that. I think it's inconsistent. Like you watch some games and like he's chirping and we'll try to get a little bit more involved, try to slip blocks. And then you watch other games and there's definitely times where I feel like he's kind of getting himself blocked more or less. But out there on the perimeter, like when they throw screens to his side, he will slip blocks, he'll take on blocks. Now, with being 173 pounds, there are obviously deficiencies there. Like there are times where he gets blocked by some of these bigger receivers. It looks like he got hit by a car crash. I mean, that's the kind of impact that you'll see his head jawed back. But I think Wiggins is a really interesting player because, like I said, you just do not see guys move like this. How sudden he is,
Right.
the change of direction, the
Yeah.
fluidity. His hips are so smooth, and like the speed is kind of the name of the game. And I also think, like you were talking about, things that you can't necessarily answer. There are not very many players at the NFL level that have ever succeeded at 173 pounds. And he is a slender framed guy. He is not going to add a bunch of weight at the next level. So you have to answer
Yeah.
your question like this dude's a historical outlier. Now, having said that, this size really didn't show up as much as you would think against bigger receivers down the field. Like I watched this dude go head to head with Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, both bigger body receivers. It was not an issue. Like he does find he doesn't always locate the ball for like interceptions, but he does find the ball. He's a face guarder, but he'll go up. He has good leaping ability to play the ball at the catch point. So it doesn't show up as much as you would probably think for this body type. So
Mhm.
I don't know. Interesting player. Definitely someone to keep in mind with that 20 because I do think he's going to be there.
So we talked a lot about the guys that would be in play, should they take one at 20 or in like a slight trade down scenario. Let's get through the rest of this list here quickly before we get to some questions. Six, Ennis Raich out of Missouri, a guy that I really like, probably would have him right around that same range, followed by Renardo Green, Max Melton, Elijah Jones out of Boston College inside of your top 10 is an interesting one. Kamari Lassiter at 10, TJ Tampa at 11, Mike Sainer still 12, Dekamarian Richardson, very interesting player out of Mississippi State. Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky. That is the one that I said I wanted to bring up an issue with because he's in my top 10. And then DJ James out of Auburn, finishing out your top 15 that you put out on the site. Whichever guys out of that group that you like really wanted to highlight, I'll give you the floor. But I just wanted to bring up, I wanted to ask you about one guy specifically. Was Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest, a guy that's played inside and outside and traveled with top receivers, obviously in the ACC, maybe a little bit different. But what you saw from him, why he didn't crack your top 15, and then Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky, a guy that I'm super high on. Again, definitely going to be finish inside my top 10, and why you had him at 14.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me, just guys that I kind of wanted to highlight, Max Melton, a guy who honestly I
I
was a
like
little
Max
bit
Melton a lot.
lukewarm on going into like the Senior Bowl because some of the tape that I watched I was like, I mean, he just seems like a massive projection to me. And then I started watching more. I think the Michigan game kind of highlighted the things that he does really well. I love the athleticism. Like, this dude has a speed to carry. I watched this dude carry Roman Wilson on a crossing route over the middle of the field, stride for stride, near the high red zone area. And I think Roman Wilson is one of the fastest play speed guys, slot only receiver, but this dude can really fly. And Melton matched him stride for stride and broke up the pass. Really impressive there. I think that, his click and close ability, he's a really sudden, explosive mover, excellent special teamer. Like, he's actually blocked multiple punts in college. So, like, that's kind of interesting to me as well. Something that, if you're talking about a day 2 cornerback, like, we're probably going to have to play some special teams. I think he's a really good player in that regard. A guy who's highly regarded in terms of like intangibles and stuff that I've read. The other people, like you mentioned, Elijah Jones, Renardo Green, two guys that can play in press coverage. I'm just higher on that. I think it really speaks more about like the things that I value at the cornerback position. I value man coverage ability more than, anything else. You got to have the athleticism to do it. But I think both of those guys are, really pesky man defenders that stay in phase. They play the football. Renardo Green has like 16 or 17 pass breakups last season. He's another guy, like you mentioned, Carson traveled around with some of the best receivers in the league. Had some really good tape against Malik Neighbors, LSU. I know you like him as well. So those two guys, Elijah Jones, I loved his tape. Literally didn't get to it until like a week ago, and I wanted to put him. I had to put him inside of my top 10 because of how impressive it was. You mentioned Andrew Phillips, from Kentucky. First thing with Phillips, man, like I think that there are a lot of people that are really smarter than I am, that are higher on Andrew Phillips. So he is definitely a guy that I could end up being
he's
a little bit too low on.
he's a Dane Brugler guy for sure. I
He
think that
is.
he's been talking him up a ton. Yeah.
Dane Brugler actually has him, I believe, like he's like around like 50 something or 60. Like he's as high as anyone is with Brugler. I think the biggest thing with me, I don't see, like, he is a really competitive player and he works really well flying down to like the line of scrimmage. Really good in terms of like I said, that explosiveness down towards the line, preventing like yards after catch. But like, I just saw so much inconsistency in coverage. There was just a lot of times where I feel like he didn't really know where he needed to be. Really inconsistent technique. Like, they play a lot of kind of that like side saddle technique with his back to the sideline, which I don't necessarily love in general. That's a coaching thing, but I just didn't see as many like impressive or highlight worthy reps. Now, one thing I do like about him is even when he was in that like side saddle technique and playing like outside leverage, he has the explosiveness, the closing speed, and the burst to get in on like dig routes and get competitive at the catch point. So I did like that. I just feel like he's more of a projection than like a guy like Max Melton is to me. And I even said this in my kind of blurb on the rankings where I had Max Melton inside the top 10. He is a little bit more of a bet on the traits, but I like Melton's length. I think he's a little bit longer, and I absolutely have more, I guess, hope that Melton could be a true inside-outside versatile guy, whereas Phillips, I'm pretty sure that he's only going to play in the nickel. And that is something to me too. Like, I've kind of adjusted over the last like year or two with corners and receivers, like guys that have true and can be good players inside and outside. I value that a little bit more than I used to. And guys that can only play like in the slot, I probably ding that a little bit more than I used to too, just because of the way the NFL's trending.
Yeah, I mean, overall, your list is very similar to what I feel like mine would look like. I would probably, because I like Melton above him as well, but I would probably move him up to 9 and just slide everybody down and not have Lassiter in my top 10. That's probably where I would be at. Maybe rearrange the order a little bit, but I mean,
yeah, I think Lassiter is he's a very difficult eval for me because, some of the things I talked about, like that I really value in terms of looking at corners, like, the fluidity, the change of direction skills. Speed is a big part of playing at cornerback. I mean, it is absolutely a stopwatch type of position. And there is just a glaring lack of speed on Lassiter's tape. I just don't see, like, some people are saying that he plays faster than 4.62 or 4.64, whatever he ran at the pro day. He does not. I strongly disagree with that. And I think that some of the numbers that you look at with him are just really misleading. He plays a lot of trail technique with help over the top. And I think that kind of limited some of the exposure to some deep targets. There were times where I saw him targeted deep or stacked vertically. The throws were off target that didn't necessarily show up in the box score, the stats for him. I also think he's extremely grabby. And I will tell you that the guy who actually taught me a good lesson about this, he actually had a decent pro career, was Darquez Denard from Michigan State. He was a guy, really liked the tape in terms of like he was super competitive. He had this like this streak to him. He was always around the ball, but there was people that would say like, "Oh, he's really physical. He's a little bit overly physical." And I said, "Oh, he's just grabby. Like he'll get over that at the next level. They'll teach him whatever." The thing is, when cornerbacks lack athleticism and they're grabby going to the next level, that's a big red flag for me because at the
Yeah.
NFL level, they just don't let you get away with nearly as much contact as they do at the collegiate level. So I just really struggle to see him as an outside corner. And honestly, like him sneaking into the top 10 was more about his projection. I think his agility numbers do show up a little bit more on tape. And I think he's got the demeanor to come up and play in the slot because I think he's a good enough tackler to do so. So that was kind of my projection for him.
That's fair. Okay. We might get to some more corner stuff as we go through these questions, but I do want to make sure that we get to these before we get too deep into this episode. This one's interesting. Steelers 22 says A.D. Mitchell as a prospect versus George Pickens as a prospect. Who's the better prospect and who would you prefer? Obviously, George is already on the team, so nothing we can do about that. And obviously, we like to play. But I think this is interesting because Lance Zierlein, NFL.com, his player comp for A.D. Mitchell was actually George Pickens.
That's that's so interesting to me because I actually don't think they're that. There are some similarities in their game, but it's not a one for one type of comp. I actually have. I went back and looked at this actually for an episode that I think maybe we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I don't know, but he actually grades out higher than George did. One thing that Mitchell obviously has in his favor is he's not coming off an ACL injury. Like George, unfortunately, only played a handful of snaps his final year in Georgia, and then he was an underclassman, left school early. But similar kind of movers in that they're really flexible in their lower half. I think A.D. Mitchell's an even better athlete. I think he's a little bit more twitched up. I think he does have a little bit more top line speed. I think that George is better at the catch point in terms of timing and understanding how to use his body. But both are kind of guys that I've put my stock on a little bit. Like I was pretty high on George Pickens. I think I had him as the number 30 player on my big board a couple years ago. Had him with the early second round grade. That was, well, I think above the consensus and obviously above where he was drafted. And then, A.D. Mitchell's my wide receiver 4 in this class and someone that has a true first round grade for me. I'm bullish about the talent because I think that receivers that can create their own separation and can get open at will, I just value that so much at the next level. And when I see like the potential of what he could be and how he moves, he just moves way different for a guy that's, 6'2", over 200 pounds. And I'm pretty bullish on the upside, even if I acknowledge that, some of the effort concerns are definitely a little bit concerning. But the Steelers, Mike Tomlin, he consistently gets the most out of these guys. So if anywhere, I think Pittsburgh's the best landing spot for him. And I would be thrilled to get him in the 4-1-2.
Yeah, I think kind of what you said on the back end of that is where the differences for me lie. You mentioned how easy he moves, how good of a route runner he is. I'm not saying that George isn't, especially once the ball is in his hands, the way that he moves, but he doesn't run the tree in the way that A.D. Mitchell does. So to me, that's probably the biggest difference between the two coming out. But yeah, I think it's interesting, like you, that Lance Zierlein's comparison was that. I don't necessarily see it. And I know that you're not real big on comps in general. So like if there's one that makes sense, you'll throw it out there, but you don't want to just force them. My guy Donnie Football says, did you enjoy WrestleMania, Zach? I absolutely did. Saw Donnie while I was there. It's a great weekend. Are you into golf, Derrick? Any interest in the Masters?
I
Okay, so
don't
this might be tough.
I don't have a ton of interest in the Masters, but I will say like people in the office have been doing a lot of golf stuff. I think golf for me, just sports in general that are not fast paced. If you guys like know me, I'm an energetic dude. So I just anything that's not extremely fast paced is just not
You
up
started
my
with
alley.
baseball?
I
Pace of
do,
play, though,
but
is
I
what's
will
up.
say I went to a Pirates game. I went to a Pirates game the last time I was in Pittsburgh. You didn't come, even though I invited you, but you
I
did
can't
not
remember
come.
what I was
But
doing. I remember this, though.
I went to a Pirates game. That was actually really fun. Like baseball games in person are cool. You will
Well,
not catch
especially
me
at that
watching
ballpark.
it. Yeah, you won't catch me watching a ton on TV, but I do keep up with baseball more now than I probably ever have. So
Okay, well, so Mark asked, in honor of the Masters, which Steelers player is the best golfer? And to be honest, I know the answer even though, this is supposed to be like a superlative here, legitimately the best golfer now that Patrick Peterson is no longer on the team, because it would have been him. He's like a legit golfer, plays in tournaments and stuff, is Chris Boswell.
Really?
Hmm.
That's interesting. I can
Yeah.
see it.
The specialists are typically good, but like Patrick Peterson is legit a golfer. So like last year when he was on the team, he would have definitely been the answer.
Yeah.
Matt Sable says, do you expect a package of plays for Fields this year, such as in the red zone? I do, because I look at what Arthur Smith did when he had Ryan Tannehill and Marcus Mariota. They had a package of plays for Mariota. I definitely expect that we're going to see Justin Fields have some type of role when you get down there in short yard situations around the goal line, especially because like Russell Wilson still has some mobility left, and probably he thinks he has more than he does. But at 35 years old, I think if they're going to kind of try to use those types of packages, it would be Justin Fields that they opt to go with as opposed to Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, I did a cut up of this after they signed Fields, but over the past 2 seasons, there's been 7 touchdowns that Arthur Smith dialed up on zone read variations in the red zone. So
Mm.
I definitely think that that's definitely a thing. You mentioned Marcus Mariota, like he leaned on
Yeah.
that more with Mariota at quarterback than he did with Ritter, but Ritter did it a little bit as well. But it is a good kind of change up to his philosophy and some of the things he likes to do on the ground. So quarterback run game is extremely valuable in the red zone. I talk about that quite a bit, and I think that that element adds a little bit more of a dynamic. Even
Josh
though
Allen.
I'm not really a big like alternating quarterback guy, but I could definitely see a package
Yeah,
of plays, obviously, for sure.
sure. This one's interesting too. TJ Watt for MVP says, how would you feel if they double dipped at wide receiver with an athletic guy like Tez, Wilson, or Leggett added with a route runner slot type like McCaffrey, Polk, Rice, Pearsall?
Man, that was a wide range of players right there. I don't even know that I would classify some of those guys in those buckets. I think double dipping at receiver is on the table. I think that they would probably have to require a little bit more capital than they've got right now. I'm not as crazy on some of the day 3 receivers as some other people are, but I think it depending on what you got early, you could maybe mix and match a little bit. Like I said, they don't have a wide receiver 2 on the roster right now. I don't even know that they have a wide receiver 3 on the roster either. So I do think that double dipping makes sense. I do
Mhm.
think, if you add a guy, like let's just say if they get Leggett or Pearsall and on day 2, those guys are probably going to be the power slot type that goes to Z when they go 2 wide receiver sets. If you're going to add a day 3 player, maybe you go with a like more of a pure burner, or maybe you go with more of like a gadget type of player. I'm not really sure exactly, but I'm all for like adding talent at the receiver position. This is a pretty deep group, and I think that there's definitely obviously a need. Who would be your favorite, I guess, double dip option?
Ooh. I mean, I want Ricky Pearsall to be a Steeler, so he would
Yeah,
definitely be the first
no
one,
matter
and then I'm
what.
just trying to yeah. So I'm trying to think of what the best one to pair with him would be later on. You'd be looking for probably a bigger body to play on the outside. Hmm. I don't know, man. The problem with that though is
Like I
how
really
many
one of the
outside receivers are gonna go like are you gonna find on day 3? So if the first one is a slot,
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, I think that there are some intriguing options. The thing is, it kind of sucks because I feel like I'm lower now than consensus on Malachi Corley from Western. But
mm,
if they could get Corley on early day 3, which is kind of like where I would prefer to get him at, where I see like him having legitimate value, he would actually be a really good kind of double dip option to a guy like Ricky
yeah,
Pearsall that you're talking about, or a guy that could match up with Xavier Leggett. You know what I'm saying? I think some of the day 3 guys that I would be interested in, Jamari Thrash from Louisville. That's probably like one of
yeah.
my big, like I'm a little bit higher on him than consensus. So that would be interesting. Thrash has good speed. He's a really good route runner. I'm not I think that the play strength is a little bit of a concern in terms of could he play on the outside full time, but I do think he's got inside outside versatility upside, and he's somebody on day three. Like I said, I think guys that know how to get open and can create explosive plays, those are valuable for me. So I think he would be an intriguing double dip option, but I don't know that they've actually shown like a lot of public interest in Thrash.
Right. Like Javon Baker, where do you think he'll play? Like, what's his role gonna
Oh, he's
be?
an X. Yeah, he's an X. Like, but like if he's a day three guy, I mean, like I don't know
Yeah.
where the consensus necessarily has him. He ended up in the like where did I put him? I put him at 13, I think. Um, I ended up having a third round grade on
Which, like, in
him.
this class is yeah, I would say in this class, that's high. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up having a third round grade on him. He's a really good route. He's a good route runner for his size, and I think he can run the full route tree. He's a guy who, honestly, like even though he doesn't run extremely fast, like he won a lot of vertical reps in college. He created a lot of explosive plays. Now, I did find myself kind of falling for some fool's gold because there's a couple plays on there that are not really translatable, like blown coverages and things like that, but the only thing with Baker, and this isn't something that I'm not saying I don't care about it, but like it's not something that is super concerning to me at this point. Um, his hands are inconsistent. Like he'll make a
Mm.
contested catch grab and then he drops some easy like concentration drops. He's a really high drop rate. I think one of the highest in the class. So that was that I did kind of negatively note that in his scouting report, but he would be an intriguing guy if he were to fall like kind of in day three, you were to get a slot receiver. Maybe you could get Baker, somebody that can play outside. I don't know. That would be an interesting option.
He's the one that would probably be my answer with pure. Just go. I'm going through a list here. Um, I don't know. Cornelius Johnson out of Michigan, obviously underutilized in college. You know that there's not much of a passing game at Michigan,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I'm not saying he's going to be the Nico Collins, you know, the Michigan wide receiver that was underutilized in school and no one knew how good he was unless you were actually watching the tape because the box score wouldn't tell the story. But
Hmm.
um, De Niro says, will the rookie wide receiver or Pat Muth be the number 2 option in Smith's offense?
You know, that's that's a good question. I don't know who the rookie receiver is going to be. I mean, if it's going to
That's
be
fair. Yeah. So,
if
okay,
it's a guy
let's
like
hypothetically say it's a guy taken on day 2.
okay, I mean, I think there's a path for both. To be honest with you, like I think Ricky Pearsall he's an NFL ready contributor. I mean, I just did a video on my YouTube channel, a scouting
Welcome
report
to the
on
thumbnail, by the way.
Pearsall.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then but I mean he's an NFL like instant contributor. He's a guy that can play inside outside. I think that there are so many traits with him. The body control, the hands are exceptional. He understands how to get open, create separation, good route runner, deceptive guy. He knows how to set defenders up. And I think all that's going to translate very, very quickly. And he tested like an absolute freak athlete. So I think he can come in and be like a wide receiver, like a low end wide receiver two, maybe like preferably wide receiver three, because you don't want to rely on rookies to come in and be, extremely important parts of your passing offense. But I think,
Mhm.
I'm interested to see what Pat does. I know you just had him on your channel for an interview. I'm
Shout
very
out.
interested to see, his bounce back. Yeah, last year was a little bit of a rough year. The Steelers obviously had quarterback problems. Pat had some injuries. And some things like that. So I'm interested to see. I'm hoping that he can bounce back. Going into a contract year, this would be an excellent year for him to kind of blow up and have a lot of production. So I'm curious on what that looks like. But I think my answer would be depends on the receiver, but it also I could see it going either way.
I think this is an interesting one. So the Steelers have sniffed around the Brandon Ayuk and Debo Samuel trade markets with the Niners, meaning they've called and they've asked. Same thing with Washington, although it sounds like when they called about Terry McLaurin, Washington just said screw off and hung up the phone immediately. Does this make us feel any differently about the idea of them trading up for a receiver if they were willing to be aggressive for a veteran receiver?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you're talking about. Are you talking about trading up in the first round? I don't see that. I mean, I would be really surprised if that happened. That would require, to me, Odunze getting out of like the top 10 to 12 picks. I think that's and
And I will be
I
absolutely shocked if he is still available after
yeah.
9.
Yeah,
And that's even like, yeah.
I would be pretty floored if that happened. So for me in the first round, do not think it's all that likely. Now, however, in the second round, like if so here's the thing with AD Mitchell. I think opinions on him are going to be all over the place. I could 100% see like a scout taking AD Mitchell's film into a prospect evaluation meeting, and they show his 2-minute cut up, and he could do all these different things. And then the coaches are like, okay, why is this dude not a top 10 pick? And then the evaluator has to say, well, he doesn't play all that hard all the time. Like he takes plays off, and I could instantly see coaches like going, like depending on who you are, like just roll their eyes, be like, nope, give me somebody else. Don't want him. Absolutely not. So like I think opinions on him around the league could vary. Now I will say this: if AD Mitchell falls out the first round, and the Steelers are able to get, like, say they get an offensive lineman, say they get a tackle upgrade or something like that, or best case scenario, say they trade back from 20, they go to like 27 or so, or like 25, 26. They get a tackle, Tyler Guyton, Amarius Mims, somebody like that. They were able to pick up an additional day 2 pick. I would be head over heels if they traded up in the second round to get Mitchell if he started to fall. Because I think that, obviously I'm higher on him than the consensus, but I think trading up on day 2 could potentially be in play. But I still think Leggett and Pearsall to me are the two most likely wide receiver targets. And I think that that discussion probably starts at 51 and potentially maybe in the third round.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you even on the names. Like I said, Ricky Pearsall is the one to me that, like, if somebody were to ask me right now and I had to give an answer for the wide receiver the Steelers are going to draft, that's my answer as we sit here right now. That could change within the next couple weeks before the draft gets here. Actually, not even 2 full weeks before the draft gets here. That's how close we are getting to that time of year. But yeah, I'm in full agreement with you there. This is an interesting one. All football watches. Who are some players that you think are no-brainer picks the Steelers cannot pass on if they fall?
That's a good question. See, no brainers is tough because I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. Because I literally just
I mean,
went
I'll
on
be honest,
Twitter.
like Terry and Arnold falls into that bucket for me. Like, I don't
Yeah,
care
that's
that
a good point.
with,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
I
good
don't
point.
care what the tackles look like at that point. I would take Terry and Arnold over
Yeah,
Mims, Guyton, whatever it might be.
yeah. I
Mims is
mean,
close, but
Terron Arnold would be in that conversation for me. There's really not another name that directly stands out, and just because there are guys that I like and would be happy with at 20, but I recognized some of the downsides, like for
mhm.
Amarius Mims. Like I think that he's worth the 20th pick because I think he could be one of the best players in the entire class. But he could also, never be healthy enough to play a full season. I think that there's obviously a scary element to that and some uncertainty. I mentioned that I like AD Mitchell, but I can see some of the concerns in terms of like, is this dude going to be able to lock in, for a full 17 plus game season and bring it on every single rep? Like I get the concerns there, even if I would be happy with them as the pick. So in terms of like no brainer, I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect prospect. There's no such thing as a safe prospect. I mean, safe prospects bust all the time. I mean, the Steelers, maybe there's a specific quarterback I have in mind that was built as a safe prospect that didn't work out. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, there's so much unknown. I agree though. Terry Arnold, if he was to fall at 20, it's a sprint the
Yeah.
card up type of
Well, and that's
situation.
the thing is, when I think of that, the situation that at least the way that I'm taking this question is because in my ideal situation, I know it takes 2 to tango. The Steelers trade back from 20.
Yeah,
So
I
the way
agree.
that I'm taking this question is Terry and Arnold is on the board at 20. Can I
Mhm.
realistically say that I would rather trade back than the Steelers just staying at 20 and taking Terry and Arnold? No, I would rather just take him than trade back. That's how much I like him. With pretty
Yeah.
much, I would say anybody else on the board in that situation, or in most situations, I'm saying I'd rather trade back.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would agree. And like I said, I think the other name, I mean, it would never happen. Like Odunze, like if that's the other thing for me, it's a no-brainer situation. Like if we're talking about if Odunze fell to like after 12, like into the mid-teens,
Mhm.
like you're talking about kind of weighing both scenarios. Would I rather stay at 20? Would I rather trade back, or would I rather go up a couple picks and go get Odunze? That's a no-brainer type of situation for me because I don't care the 7 additional picks.
Also,
I think
probably a no-brainer situation for the Buffalo Bills.
yeah, I think that that's 100% what I would do. So those guys that I just have a lot of faith in, like my evaluation of them as players, and I also think obviously with the need, they need a corner, specifically a slot corner. They need a receiver. Those just
Yeah,
really make sense.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. And then the last one that I wanted to get to, and for some reason I just refreshed my page, so it went away. Um, we talked about Cooper DeJean, so we don't have to answer that one. So Matt, we'll do this. Will be the last one. Could defensive line be in the conversation for? I almost want to tweak this question because they said double dip, which I definitely just don't see. But like defensive line, maybe early in the draft. This specific question said, could it be in conversation for a double dip? If yes, which two styles of DL would you like them to focus on? But I want to tweak it a little bit just to ask you if you think that defensive line could be in play for them, even on day two.
Mm, I mean, I don't want to rule it out because there has been some interest. I mean, they met with some
Yeah.
guys at the combine. Byron Murphy is a player who's being mocked around that range, but aside from the form at the combine, I don't know if there's been a ton of public interest with him. But I do think, I mean, there aren't 20 players in the class better than Byron Murphy. There's not 20 players in the class better than Johnny Newton. So those two guys, in terms of interior defensive linemen, I'm really, really high on. Probably higher on than the consensus would say. But the Steelers, like we said, we've spent this whole show, and we've really spent the whole cycle, talking about all the needs that the Steelers have, all the needs, some of
Yeah.
which have been created by their own doing, and then some of which just were always going to be there. Like they were always going to need a center this offseason. They were always going to need, cornerback help this offseason. They were always going to want an upgraded tackle. Now they created the receiver position. Positional need, I think, on their own accord. But I think, it's interesting. I don't see it happening. I mean, Brandon Fisk from Florida State, that's a guy they brought in for a top 30. He's a really interesting player. I could see them really liking, his style of play. He tested like a freak. He plays like a really good athlete. Pretty unrefined in terms of like hand usage and total like pass rushing toolkit, but the dude plays with an unbelievable motor. Like he's extremely
Mhm.
well conditioned. I could absolutely see them, even though he doesn't necessarily fit like the height, weight, length measurables that they typically look for. I could see them loving him. Um, the kid from Clemson, Rook Roro, that would be another guy that I think that they would look at. Maybe if he were to fall to like the third round, just because like he really, I think, fits kind of more of like the Steelers-y mold. He's a little bit lighter, but those guys would be probably guys that I think it'll end up being Mason Smith. If I'm not a huge
Yep.
fan of his tape, but I think in the middle rounds, I could see them pulling the trigger on that as well. Double dipping to me would be surprising.
Well, that's right.
Christian Boyd too late for North Iowa. Probably in the 5th or 6th round range. That's probably where he's slated to go. He has some flashes on tape, even though it's not overly consistent. Kind of a unique body type for an interior player, but those guys are guys that I think if you're looking for names that could potentially end up in Pittsburgh, those are guys that I would probably look up.
Sure. And I think as of right now, like round four is probably for me where I would be kind of looking at that conversation being
Mm-hmm.
had. But that's without them. I mean, very possible with it before round four, they trade back in one of those spots. I mean, look at last year, obviously the slight trade up for Broderick. You gave up the 4th round pick to do it, but then you traded back in the 3rd round, still landed Darnell Washington and then acquired another pick. So you had one in the 4th round. So, maybe they'll do something similar to that where you're not necessarily losing any draft picks in terms of the total, maybe just moving
Yeah.
around the board a bit.
And
So
and you
go
could
ahead.
you could definitely make the argument, I think you and I are both on the same page. That's definitely not likely. You can make the argument that the Steelers just their best path to winning next season is just to be this dominant defensive team. And I think when you look at the totality of things and the way the roster's currently constructed,
Mhm.
dropping a guy like Byron Murphy into that mix, dropping a guy like Johnny Newton into that mix, like, the Steelers defense is like when they're at their best, obviously it kind of revolves around the pass rush, and, I've
Yeah.
tweeted this out a couple weeks ago, but I think, just watching Johnny Newton's film and I'm like, if you put him as a 3 tech or a 2-eye in sub package football, if you put him on the same side as TJ Watt, who is going to be able to block them? Like, because neither one of those guys are guys that you want to leave on an island one on one. So I don't know.
Sure.
It is an interesting theory. I just think, with the holes, the way the roster is. And I also want to say, too, I think people are maybe putting the cart before the horse a little bit, maybe from an expectation standpoint, because like the Steelers, they have some holes on the roster. They're probably going to come out of draft weekend with still some holes in positions that you don't feel great about. That's just the reality of it.
Sure.
I just want to put that out there into the universe so that you guys are like going crazy on Sunday after the draft and the Steelers don't have like the slot corner upgrade that you guys want. Like that just there's a really good reality that they're going to have one or two holes after the draft that they're either going to have to acknowledge as weaknesses next season, or they're going to have to maybe try to find like a veteran, like stopgap free agent option, or maybe a free or a summer ad, like a late cut from some team, a trade down the line during training camp. But I just want to make sure to throw that out there, like expectations. Let's just keep them a little realistic.
Maybe even signing guys on day 3. Like, I mean, Shannon Sullivan was signed
that
on
happened
the
last
3rd
year.
day of the draft
Yeah.
last year. So
yeah, and obviously those are not they're not upgrades. They're I don't even know if I would call like Shannon Sullivan that type of player that's like even like a baseline starter. But you got to have bodies, and like I said, that there will be positions that the
Band-Aid.
Steelers are they're going to have to acknowledge we're not going to be good here at this point. That's just going to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, great conversation. A little bit longer of an afternoon drive, which any time that you put Derrick and I together is probably bound to happen. So, Alan, yell at yourself
Shocker.
if you're going to yell at anybody about it. So, Derrick, tell the people they can find you.
Yeah, at Steelers_DB on X. I always say Twitter. Smitty's got me saying X.
Got it.
And YouTube, and all of my written work on SteelersNow.com. Got wide receiver rankings and cornerback rankings up. I'm gonna do some more ranking lists for positions that I'm finalizing, scouting evals on, and then hopefully going to try to put together some semblance of a big board once I can get all my thoughts kind of.
There we go. So one of the questions we didn't get to was about if you were going to be doing a big board. So there you go. There's your answer.
Yeah. It's probably not going to be a top 100 like I've done the past couple of years, just because I've watched over that amount of prospects, but I just don't want to watch running backs, and I feel bad putting a top 100 board, and I won't put somebody on the board without watching 3 games. And I just don't want to watch 3 games of some of these running backs. So I just might not do it. It may be the top 50, but
that's fair. There we go. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell on this YouTube channel. Also to check out Derrick's YouTube channel. He just mentioned he got that Ricky Pearsall video. I mean, the thumbnail is great, so go watch the video alone because of that. Leave us a comment down below with your thoughts on anything that we talked about on here, any questions for a future episode, all that good stuff. If you were listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review over there. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Come check out the pod. The audience is growing, getting pretty close to 12,000, I believe, on the YouTube channel at this point, so let's just keep that growing. But yeah, other than that, for Derrick Bell, for myself, you can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.